sometimes, especially around middle school, when kids are tweens or teenagers, parents have this tendency to pull back and be like, okay, I guess they need freedom now. They're changing. They've got their friends now and they don't need mom and dad. So they kind of step back and think, I guess we've taught them enough. Now let's see how they do. And I'm like, no, 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 no. This isn't the time to pull back. They actually need you now, maybe more than ever. Yes, it's going to look different. I'm certainly no helicopter parent, but they need you speaking into their life and they need boundaries. And I believe with all my heart, now that I have older boys and maybe your older girls would say the same, they are grateful when you give them a boundary. When you say no, there's a sense of security that gives because they need to know that somebody in their life knows what is absolutely okay and what's not. And I think when parents are kind of like, well, you decide, they're kind of like, I don't know, who knows? How do I know? They need somebody that says, I actually know what's right and wrong.
Welcome to Homeschool Talks, a podcast by HSLDA. This is a show about all things homeschooling, from practical tips to inspiring stories and everything in between. We're so glad you've joined us today, and we hope you enjoyed the program.
Well, hello, I am LaNissir James. I'm a homeschool mom of 7, and I'm very, very excited to be here. I'm also one of the HSLDA educational consultants, and today I'm so excited. I have the incredible Monica Swanson, and I am so excited about our conversation today about teenage boys. Woo. And I know you have a lot of experience on this topic. And so I'm very excited. I want to tell you a little bit about Monica. And then Monica, I'm going to have you tell us a little bit about you. Monica is a wife and a mom of 4 boys. She's the author of Boy Mom, and she's the host of the Boy Mom podcast. She's a blogger and a speaker. And I hear, Monica, you're all the way from Hawaii. The problem we all wish we had, that we were in Hawaii. So, tell us a little bit about you.
You bet. Well, thank you so much for having me. Great to be here. I love talking about boys, raising boys. Yes, I'm coming to you from the North Shore of Oahu in Hawaii, where I just recently realized I've spent the majority of my life somehow. So I've been here 20 years. But my husband and I both come from the Pacific Northwest. So we both come from small towns in Oregon and Washington. But my husband went to medical school in Oregon, and then his residency program brought us here to Oahu. And as things tend to go, we never ended up leaving. So here we are. We have 4 sons. 2 have graduated high school, and they are in California in a small Christian college together, which is super cool. And then I've got a senior in high school who is a professional surfer. So that's kind of an interesting part of our story. And then I have a 6th grader as well. So I've been homeschooling. I've lost count of the numbers, but since my oldest was in 2nd grade. So I've homeschooled most of them all the way through. And I just love getting to share our life, the things I've learned from others, and the experiences we've had with people all over the world, thanks to the internet and the times we live in. So that's kind of my life in a nutshell.
Oh, that is so exciting. And I too would have stayed in Hawaii too. So I'm going to blame you guys to stay there. Well, you guys heard me say I was a mom of 7. And so our ages, we figured out just before we started, are somewhat the same. So I have 2, but the difference is I have 5 girls and 2 boys, and my first 3 were girls. And so my first daughter has already graduated college. My second daughter, we just dropped off, and she's starting her sophomore year in college. Then I have a senior who's a daughter, and then comes my son who is a sophomore in high school. And then I have an 8th grader, a 5th grader, and a kindergartner.
My goodness, you are never bored.
Never, ever, unless you hide in the bathroom. You got to love it. So I want to find out, how did you get started homeschooling? We've been homeschooling right about the same amount of time. It's been about over 15 years for me. And tell me how you got started homeschool. What made you decide to homeschool?
Yes, it's always so interesting when people ask that. Looking back, I try to remember what exactly got us started. My husband and I were both raised in the public school systems, and I never in my life would have dreamt that I would be a homeschool mom. And I know that's a common thing a lot of people say. But I think there was a combination for us. The schools in Hawaii are not known to be ranked very well academically when you look at, all the charts of how schools are doing. And we were kind of iffy about that. everything in Hawaii is very expensive. So we looked at private schools and we're like, I don't think we're going to be able to afford that. And I had a couple friends through church who were homeschooling their kids. And my oldest son actually started to beg me. He was in first grade and he just thought the idea of learning at home would be so cool. He was pretty passionate about learning anyways. He would find my husband's medical school textbooks and like draw diagrams of the heart and the brain. And like, so he was naturally drawn to learning. And so I was like, okay, I'll try it for 1 year. My husband was a little unsure. He was like, aren't most homeschoolers kind of weird? And I'm like, yeah, I think so, but let's try it. And after that first year, we were like, there's no way we would ever go back. We were just so convinced that our family was growing in such special ways, that the boys were learning so many things. We had so much more freedom. And we were just like, this is the best. We were really happy. I mean, don't get me wrong. In that first year, there were many tears. There were many hard moments of doubt. There's still some tears and moments of doubt, but overall, we knew this was for us.
Yes, that's wonderful. I think everybody kind of starts as this reluctant homeschooler and then they go into I love it and I would never do anything
Yes.
different,
Yes.
So that's
Totally.
exciting.
Yeah.
And so you actually have a blog, if I
Mhm.
understand correctly,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
blog is what teenage boys need most from his mom. I love that title. That's exciting. So tell us, how did you come about that particular title in your blog post?
Right. Well, I had been blogging for a few years. I started blogging in 2011 and I kind of dabbled, sharing some of our life, but I was kind of reluctant to try to give too much advice. But at this point, I had two boys who were both teenagers. And I think anytime I went on social media, on the internet, I saw so much bad news. So many moms either sharing just how horrible it was, the teenagers are just awful, or making jokes about it and kind of throwing up their hands like, oh, what are you going to do, those teenagers, And I was like, wait, that's not my experience at all. Like, I love these teenagers. They're incredible young men. I'm enjoying this. I mean, it's not easy. We have rough moments, but I just started to reflect on what are some of the things I think they need that maybe some parents could use encouragement in. Like maybe some parents aren't as comfortable just going there and exploring what are the things they're searching for when they're getting into trouble? What are some of the things that they really need from parents? So I really wrote it without a whole lot of thought. I didn't think that I had done anything, new or novel, but in a couple weeks, almost 2 million people read it and shared it. And I was like, okay, I think I've tapped into something. And that's when I just had floods of emails and messages from parents just saying, thank you for giving us hope. Like, I want to believe I can enjoy my teenagers. I want to believe there's good stuff ahead, but it's hard to find that word of encouragement out there. So people just really appreciated, I think, the good news that I had to share.
Yes, yes. And I'm with you. I am just we went from being infertile to being able to have a baby. And the first baby we had, of course, was a girl. We were just so excited. And we've been
Mhm.
so excited about every single pregnancy. Like
Mhm.
abnormally, it's excited.
Yeah.
But once I got to the third girl, I thought, okay, I'm just a girl mom. And when I found out I was having a boy, you want to talk about really, really excited. I was so excited that I was pregnant again.
Ah, that's crazy.
And of course it was a girl, and then when I found out I was pregnant again, I thought, "You're kidding me, I'm pregnant again?" And when I found out I was a boy, I was so
Woo.
excited. So,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
too am just that lover of boys. So give us
Yeah.
tips from that, blog post. Tell us what you think, if you had to say the top 2 or 3, what would you say?
Oh, that's so good. Well, one thing I love to talk about that I think is sometimes confusing to parents to find the balance is just the idea that boys need boundaries and boys need freedoms. And I think girls do too. But specifically in this blog post, I mention it. And then in my book, Boy Mom, I expand on that. And I think where people get confused is sometimes, especially around middle school, when kids are tweens or teenagers, parents have this tendency to pull back and be like, okay, I guess they need freedom now. They're changing. They've got, they're friends now and they don't need mom and dad. So they kind of step back and think, I guess we've taught them enough. Now let's see how they do. And I'm like, no, 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 no. This isn't the time to pull back. They actually need you now, maybe more than ever. Yes, it's going to look different. I'm certainly no helicopter parent, but they need you speaking into their life and they need boundaries. And I believe with all my heart, now that I have older boys and maybe your older girls would say the same, they are grateful when you give them a boundary. When you say no, there's a sense of security that gives because they need to know that somebody in their life knows what is absolutely okay and what's not. And I think when parents are kind of like, well, you decide, they're kind of like, I don't know, who knows? How do I know? They need somebody that says, I actually know what's right and wrong. And so setting some boundaries, not being afraid to say no, but then on the flip side of that is giving freedoms. And I love to talk about freedoms because I think that freedom needs to be the right kind of freedom. And, yes, we live here in Hawaii. And so for us, freedoms looks like outdoor adventure. It's like diving in caves and surfing big waves and hiking mountains. And like we love adventure. But I tell people that so often when kids get into trouble, I believe they are searching for adventure. I mean, you think about all the things that typically get a teenager into trouble, whether it's sexual promiscuity or drugs, alcohol, getting into trouble, getting addicted to video games, all those things in some way are there searching for adventure. They want to experience things. They want to feel the adrenaline rush. And I'm like, then give them healthy adventure. Say yes to some things that, yeah, they might get physically injured. I'm not talking like throw all caution to the wind. We teach our kids water safety and we make sure they're smart, but give them some opportunities to do hard things. And if you're stuck inside, I know during the pandemic and during lockdown times, it's so hard, but I'm like, well, then give them a project at home, give them a hard book to read, challenge them with a great big Lego set, like something that gives them a sense of accomplishment that's healthy. And that's going to help them not be drawn to the unhealthy adventures that so many kids are drawn to. So that's my heart, boundaries and freedoms. And then with that just is that connection with mom and dad and how important it is to just stay in relationship and never think that they don't need you because they do need you.
They do. That's so good, Monica. That is just you nailed it. That is everything.
That's just a
And
couple,
and
but
right. And I think you're right. I love what you said about parents who they see teenagers because boys get pretty big. I don't know how tall
yeah,
sons are, right?
yeah,
They could be 14, 15, 16, and they're taller than you. And and,
yes,
and outwardly they appear to be grown, but they're not. Um,
right.
and they need structure. I
They
love what
do.
they need you. And I love also what you're saying about just kind of loving them along the way. That's so
Yeah,
important because
it is.
I think kids perform differently when they know
Mhm.
their parents love them and when
Absolutely.
they know that they're watching and that they care.
Mhm.
Um, I just love all of that. But tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about, and I love adventure. You're talking to an RVer, okay? We
Oh, cool.
RV.
I love it. That's what I wanna do.
And you're always out in the outdoor. I think
Yeah.
boys naturally like to be out in the outdoors
Yes.
kind of thing.
Yes. They do.
So, when we talk about a safe space,
Yeah.
okay, in an area where you say, you don't want them to be fearful, but you want to give them freedom. How do you balance that to where you're
Yeah.
like, okay, like I'll give you an example. My son, he just got his learner's permit. He
Ooh.
is so excited. I mean,
Uh-huh.
like, of course, me, you know how we are as parents. We're not
Yeah.
we
Uh-huh.
don't want them to know that we're not excited. We're like,
Right.
"Oh," you know, he
Yes.
was so excited. He kept saying, "Oh, mom, let me try driving," before he got his learner's permit. I was like, "Nope, nope." And my husband's in law enforcement too. You gotta love it. So I'm like,
Okay.
"Yep." And so, but you want to have a safe place. Tell me how
Mm.
you unfold that for your kids and that kind of thing, so that they know that there's good and bad and yes and no and all that good stuff. Do you create some sort of safe place, and what do you do?
Right. Yes, I think this is a tricky part of parenting is really being able to kind of be a student of your own kids. And unfortunately, there's not a one size fits all. And so often, people are like, okay, at what age should we give them a cell phone? At what age should we allow them to, go away for a weekend, stay somewhere, do this, do that? And I'm like, unfortunately, I don't believe that there is one way that works for everyone. And so I love to talk about just the idea of being a student of your child and studying not what an age or a grade or what their peers are doing, but instead saying, how's your maturity level? How are you handling the responsibilities you now have? And, I love to pull out the whole with freedom comes responsibility. I'm like, buddy, I'm going to give you some freedom. And if you prove to do well with that, then I'm going to give you more. But the minute you blow it, we're going to back off. And it's because I love you and I care about you. So I think just a lot of conversations, a lot of tuning in and observing them, giving them some opportunities to try things and maybe make mistakes in the safety of your own home. Because otherwise they're going to go out in the big world where it's not, the fall isn't as comfortable as it is at home. So I think a lot of conversations, a lot of just spending time together, getting to know them, cheering them on, letting them know you are for them. And even if you discipline them, it is because you love them. So that's a lot of just conversations.
Yes, and homeschooling is such the platform for
Yeah,
for it, isn't it, Monica?
it
I mean,
is.
when you homeschool and you get the absolute privilege to spend this kind of quality time
Mhm,
with your sons,
mhm. Yep.
oh my gosh, it's just so amazing how connected. I know my daughters have gone on to college, and one of the things that I was hearing, and you tell me about your experiences with your sons, is that a lot of kids don't want to connect so much with their parents once
Mhm,
they're gone. They're
mhm.
like, "Hey, I'm gone," But my kids are always like, "Hey, mom, I'm talking to you. I don't want them to know that I'm talking to you because they don't like to talk to their parents." And I'm
Yeah, totally.
Do
I
you
love
have
it.
any of those experiences while now that your older sons are away that they still kind of love to connect with you?
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, I think one of the neatest things of homeschooling is just that relationship. You don't even realize it at the time. I think that it just is happening behind the scenes. You don't realize how close you're becoming just by being around each other and by being, a part of their education. And so, yes, with my boys in college, I feel like they've become some of my best friends and they do check in a lot and I love it. And they're not even like, they talk to me about girls, they talk to me about school, about friend situations. And I'm just like, this is the reward of all the work that went into those younger years. I don't believe that parents should be friends first with their kids. We need to be parents first. But the reward of that is that later you get to be friends. And so yeah, it's been really rewarding for me. And I'm so grateful that I'm raising sons and they're in college in a time of technology because I'm like, we can FaceTime, we can text, we're still in touch, even though they're across the ocean so far away. I love being a part of their life now in college.
Yes. And boys get themselves in some trouble sometimes, you know? Boys, we have to talk about that. We can't
Yeah.
give this whole rosy story about boys. Boys get themselves in trouble. And
Right.
so, as godly parents, it's our responsibility to set an example of
Mhm.
forgiveness. Tell us
Yes.
how you handle, it's kind of like um I can tell you some stories about my
Yeah.
boys. I'm gonna let you go first,
Oh, well,
and and ways that you push yourself to really understand that they are kids, right? And they're growing, and
absolutely.
we all make mistakes, and
We
so
all
tell
make
us a little bit
mistakes.
about that.
Yes, I think that's one thing that I've learned over time. And of course, we haven't done everything perfect, but I also spend a lot of time since I write about parenting. I research and read books. But one thing that I really have worked on is just being very honest with my kids about my imperfections. And my husband and I, this doesn't mean we dig up the dirt from our past and tell them everything, but it means really being honest, even in a day-to-day way of saying, here's an area that I blew it today. And here's an area I've struggled with. And I think that opens the door for them to know it's okay to be human and that we're striving to honor God. We're doing our best to, really have excellence in all ways, but we're all human and none of us are perfect. So I think the more real we are with our kids, it gives them that freedom to not hide things. Because I think when there's that element of shame, when kids don't feel like they can be honest with mom and dad, that's going to make everything spiral down that much worse. So having an environment of grace where we're like, we're going to blow it. You're going to blow it. Talk to us. Let us help you through this. And I think that's a beautiful thing of going from being, mommy to mom to kind of that coach and that mentor. So now my senior in high school is more likely to come to me and be like, I don't even know how to handle this, mom, because he knows there's grace. He knows I'm not going to be quick to be like, you're blowing it, you're doing it wrong. But we can actually have a conversation where there's mutual respect, where he knows I care and he knows that I'm not perfect either. And I think that that's kind of the environment that gives kids a safe place to open up and make mistakes.
Yes. And we want to promote leadership. We want to build, strong leaders. And
Mm.
so what kind of questions do you ask your sons, when they're in a situation where you feel like they need to grow? I mean, do you do that where you're kind of, I could give you the answer, but I know that if I model the answer or if I get the answer from you, it'll be something that you can own. Do you want to talk about that?
Totally, I love that, and I think that's been such a beautiful part of our boys growing up is, they kinda hit that age where mom and dad are great, and I still think we're coaches and mentors, but we also want them to connect with people outside of us who we know are gonna be good role models and influences. So, we live in a real small community, we're kinda out here in the country, but we're blessed to have a really healthy church and to have some youth leaders that really care about our kids. So we've actually really pointed our kids to like, hey, maybe that's a good one to meet with Danny and talk to your youth leader about. Maybe that's something you should reach out because we know him well enough to trust that he's going to give the kind of advice we would give. And coming from somebody else, sometimes it's more powerful. So that, as well as just setting them up, pointing them to some good role models online, some good books, helping them find people who are really representing the beliefs and the values we have at home. And then ultimately, we always turn back to the Word of God and the Bible. And, one of my favorite things to encourage parents to do is we have our boys read the book of Proverbs every day if possible. We just go through the day of the month, whatever day of the month it is, read that chapter, and then expect that around the dinner table, we might talk about it because I just think Proverbs has so much wisdom for everyday life. And so we're just like, if they come against something, if they have an issue they need to figure out, we're like, well, what does God's word say about this? Because ultimately it has the answers for everything. So we just keep pointing them back to that, giving them a little freedom to wrestle. We don't want to feed them the answers too quick because we know one day they're not going to have us right there. We want them to work through things. And so far, they've really grown in wisdom through that.
I love that. I love that. And we love reading, Proverbs and Psalms, just, one a day, and it
Yeah.
matches the day of the, so
Yes.
if it's, September 7th, and there you go, you read
Yep.
the, and that's
Totally.
great. I love that. So tell me about some of your biggest challenges in raising your teen boys. What would you say
Mm.
your biggest challenge?
Okay. I think our biggest challenge now, again, depending on where you live and what your circumstances are, I think this is going to look different for everyone. But I have found through the people who reach out to me and I communicate with all over the world, truly, the teenagers for my boys have been to a large extent a lonely season. And I think it's because some of those kids that they grew up with, who they shared values with, maybe they went to youth group, all of a sudden they hit, maybe 13, 14. And some of these kids are discovering the ways of the world and some things that might be tantalizing and interesting. And maybe they have a little more freedom to explore. And so they're starting to kind of go off on this other direction. And my boys know that that's not a direction they want to go. So they have to make some hard decisions. Now, we can still be friends with those kids, but is that someone I want to be investing time into? And I am such a huge believer in influence. I just think you become like the company you keep. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future. Like that is something I could just talk all day about. But we really coach them that, listen, buddy, it would better to be a little bit lonely than to blow it by hanging out with someone that's going to get you into trouble. And so my college boys now look back and they're like, yeah, there was a couple years where I spent a lot of time with my family. I'm like, hey, we're not so bad, are we? But they spent a lot of Friday nights watching Netflix with mom and dad. They spent a lot of weekends hanging out with us. But what I love, if anyone listening has a younger kid who's going through a lonely season, I really like to encourage people. Those were the years where my boys grew so much. They discovered passions like photography. I mean, my son would just go out in our backyard and take pictures of birds and plants. And he discovered photography, learned video editing. One of my sons learned to, code on his own, just playing around on his computer. My sons have explored different hobbies and interests and passions. And then by the time they hit those college years, even late high school, they kind of broke through some of that. They started hanging out maybe with some of the older guys, some of the youth leaders became more like friends. Now that they're in college, they have like the best friends. I mean, it's not like they didn't know how to be social. They just were being really careful about who they connected with. So now they have this fulfilling social life, and yet they can look back and go, wow, I learned to play the guitar. I learned, I grew close to God because he was my very best friend when I was bored and lonely. And he has a great relationship with his parents. So those years, as hard as it is, I just encourage parents, don't don't worry and don't compromise. Don't say, oh, my poor kid, he's alone. I'll just let him hang out with anybody just because he needs a friend. I'm like, actually, it might be okay for them to be a little bit lonely. For us, it worked
Yes.
out just fine.
Yes, I love that, Monica. And it's character building too,
Oh,
because when kids are okay with themselves,
yes.
it builds leadership. It builds their
Yes.
ability to push back on the outside forces when they come for them, right? It's kind of like,
Amen.
no, I'm okay. I'm okay with not being in trouble.
Yeah.
I don't have to go do intentionally what's wrong
Yes.
to feel important and that kind
Yes.
of thing. I love that. So
Yes.
tell me about um, some of the challenges that may be even mental, because we talked about loneliness, and
Uh-huh.
we're in a difficult time of our lives, right? We're all in a
Mhm.
difficult time of our lives,
Mhm.
and so there's some big mental issues going on now, right?
Yes. Yes.
So how do you address those issues with your son, especially with your boys?
Right, right. Well, I touched on the loneliness issue, but I think along with that, what another thing that we have to mention is just the effects of social media and the internet. And I think that that's a time the parents really can um, be a coach and a mentor to your kids, because I know for my sons, there was a time where just they found that being on social media, they were on Instagram and they were just getting kind of bummed because they were like, wow, everyone else seems to be having fun at 16. What's wrong with me? And I think that social media can be really, really dangerous to our kids' hearts and minds and identity. So I think that's an area that there was a time where, fortunately, my oldest son, had the wisdom to say, I think I'm going to get off Instagram for a while. And so he just literally took, maybe close to a year off when he was a high schooler. And the freedom that gave him was amazing. But all of that to say, I think as parents, we need to kind of figure out what are the things that are contributing, especially for kids who have to, do school from home. If they're not able to get out and do their sports, they're not able to connect with people, depending on where you live and what your rules are. Here in Hawaii, we're pretty shut down again. But all of that to say, tune into the things that are going on and have those conversations, and talk to your kids about what's going on in their heart and mind, because sometimes it's as simple as, well, maybe we should go off social media, or maybe we need to find something to tweak in the way you're approaching life, because it doesn't always mean they're depressed. It doesn't always mean you have to go into the extreme that there's something really wrong. Sometimes there's just some things you can tweak that I think is going to help them through a season.
I love that. I love
Mhm.
that. And I love the whole turn it off. It's just so important that we balance that time, because I
Oh,
think
yes.
that there's so many outside influences on all of the social media
Yeah.
channels, and kids need a break from that. They need the
Oh,
time. When you and I
we
were
all
coming,
do.
we learned how to think, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like one of my husband's grandmother used to say, kids just need to have a sit down. Just sit down.
There
You
you
don't always have to have
go.
some entertainment all the time, right?
Oh,
And
amen.
that really, really, really helps them grow, helps their brains grow. So
Yeah.
tell me, how do you meet your son's academic needs? You think about being a homeschooler, right? And I'm
Yeah.
sure that your sons probably were on different levels. How do
Yeah.
you meet their needs academically?
Right. Yeah, when people are looking into homeschooling and they ask me, like, how did you know what they needed and how they would get through high school? I understand, because that was my biggest fear. Again, coming from, a public school background where everything was mapped out for you. You didn't have to think about any of that. I was terrified that I would miss something, like that I didn't have what it takes to homeschool my kids. And my husband's a doctor, but he's not very involved in their homeschool life. So I felt all this pressure, like it's all on me. Uh, but I love that HSLDA has resources available. There's so much you guys have to offer. And here in Hawaii, I discovered a group called Christian Education Institute, CEI, and they're just a couple women. They're actually volunteers, but you can pay a tiny fee to sit down with them every year and have them kind of help tell you what needs to be, if you want your child to have, hope of going to college, which we wanted to keep that door open. I know it's not for everybody, but that was our hope, that if they wanted to go to college, they could. So they helped plan out, what are the requirements? What do you need to officially have them graduate from high school? And then this group actually also has accreditation. So I can give them my grades and all my records, and they create a transcript. So that just gave me some security. But a lot of it, I think, comes with just just like anything, you have confidence when you walk through it and you're like, you know what? We're actually doing okay. And I always remember this moment when my son was maybe a freshman in high school and he loved science and he was like watching a video for science and just doing book work. And I felt kind of lame about it. And I had a friend on the mainland that was like, oh, you should send him over. Our kid's school has a, multi-million dollar science wing. And I got all insecure, like, oh, I'm my poor son, he's not getting enough. And then I laugh because later he gets a scholarship to college. I've got an engineering major, I've got a data analytics major. They're doing fine. They didn't need the multi-million dollar science wing, but the insecurity was so real. And so sometimes you just have to walk through it and tell yourself, they're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. I'm not an unschooler. I'm not the mom that just says, oh, follow your passions, learn what you want. I'm like, no, I want you to make sure you're learning everything you need. But to a large extent, we can really relax and know that they are probably getting plenty. Let them enjoy it. Let them, pursue their passions. Just make sure that they're getting the basics and you're probably doing just fine.
That's right. That is so true. And moms need to be encouraged. And that's what we're doing at HSLDA. I'm blessed to work with a beautiful team of high school educational consultants. And I will tell you, people will homeschool when they're younger, 8th grade and below, but it's just something about high school, right?
Yeah.
People just like, oh,
Totally.
they
Yeah.
get nervous. And so that's what we're doing. We're encouraging, homeschoolers. And it's nice because we all homeschool there. And so it's
So
just
awesome.
exciting, especially through the high school season. And let me just bring up a
Absolutely.
topic that I really want to talk about, and it applies to boys. One of the things that I'm doing with my sons, and one of the things that we share a lot when people call us at HSLDA is about electives. And what's nice
Mm.
about homeschooling is that you can make the electives
Oh, yeah.
tied to the interest. And so one of the things my son started doing was we run a co-op at our church, and there's a shop there where they cut a lot of woodworking. So I encouraged
Mm.
my husband, oh, why don't we do a woodworking class? And he was like, I don't know. So we started this woodworking class that just spiraled into my son starting like a construction business because he
No
started
way.
building things.
Oh,
And then, of course, when you're in high school, you really want to give it like a unique kind of name. So it's
yeah.
construction management. And
Awesome.
so now he's working with, builders and permits and, getting a chance to sit on jobs. And I just
That
think
is
that
so
when you have unique electives and your
Yep.
children,
Mhm.
right? Your boys and you know what they're interested in. Homeschooling really gives them an opportunity to kind of dive into that. I heard you say
Yes.
something about one of your sons is a surfer. I mean, like,
Mhm.
obviously, right? He's had some
Yeah.
time. Tell us about how you bring in these unique electives into your homeschooling.
Totally. I love that so much because it took me a while to put it together and be like, wait, my son is, doing photography and photo editing like multiple hours a week. Can we call that a class? We're like, yeah, you actually can. And so it was really fun to realize how many things are school. Like we're already doing school and we didn't even realize it. So that was super fun for us to bring in music and, computer coding and videography and all that. And then, yes, my 17-year-old is a professional surfer. And so part of his senior year is he's doing some dual enrollment online classes, his first through Liberty University, because I'm starting to look at him going, I don't think he'll follow the traditional college route that his older brothers did, but he's a smart kid and we want to keep him in school. And unfortunately, surfing isn't a sport like a lot of sports where there's a college route. You can be a college athlete and then go on to the pros. You're kind of hitting your prime about the college years with surfing. And so he's signing a contract, with a sponsor, which would send him off to be traveling the world for the next few years. So for him, we have to be a little more creative and go, okay, well, we want you to get a good education. So let's start your senior year, get some dual enrollment credits so that you're familiar with the system. And then in the future, you can continue this and keep getting an education. But for him, yeah, one of the biggest things for him is putting his videos of him surfing on social media. There haven't been a lot of contests in the past couple of years. So one of the best ways to be discovered and for sponsors to find you is through Instagram. And so he spends hours putting together incredible video, and it takes a lot of different skills and music and editing. And so for him, that's been a class, is video editing, and he's already doing it. So it's really fun, as well as music and other things like that. Also having my older boys do internships while they were in high school was really fun because they got out of the house, they worked hands-on with somebody, and we could call that an internship. And it was just a really neat way to grow and expand, their education in other ways besides just out of books and online.
Yes, and that's the beauty of
It
homeschooling. I love
is. It is.
everything you're
It
saying.
is. Yeah,
Well,
and
let me
I was gonna say my youngest son, kinda out of the blue, just decided that he loves golfing, and he's a surfer too, but he is passionate about golfing, and so it's fun for me to go, "Okay, well, let's explore some ways now to learn more about golf and to see what that could mean for your future." And, he's decided already he wants to be pro, and, he's gonna be making millions as a pro, and but I love the passion, so I'm like, "Well, let's support that. Let's see what you've got, and let's look into opportunities at the golf course where maybe you can work one day and maybe you can intern here or there and learn about the whole business of golf." So it's just fun to look at all the opportunities.
Yes, and I love all of that, Monica. I just came back from Myrtle Beach, and they had Golfers Week this week, and my brother, who is an amazing golfer, came in first place down
What?
there. I tell you,
Wow.
but he wasn't homeschooled, so he didn't have the beauty to kind of build this while he was young.
Yep.
He's half of 100 and kind of getting there, but isn't it great? He'll be glad I told that, right?
Yeah,
But
that is
isn't it
awesome.
great that you have a younger son who can
Yeah.
get into golfing early and,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
do some things. That's what I love about homeschooling.
I
Now,
know.
let's talk a little bit about curriculums and tips. What kind of you obviously, dual enrollment is so exciting and
Yeah.
unique electives. We got a name for it now. All these things. Tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about some of the curriculum books you might
Yeah.
want to recommend.
Right. Well, in the early years, like a lot of people, I tried so many different things, and it was so frustrating because the truth is I loved pretty much everything I tried. Seriously, like I love homeschool curriculums. I wish I could do a new one every year, but I did hit that point, especially when I started writing and had my own work, where I was like, okay, I can't do 100 different things. We need to simplify. And so from junior high to high school on, we pretty much have focused on, my boys have used a lot of Abeka. They do the Abeka Academy online, just watching the videos, doing the book work. We also have loved using IEWs. So the Institute for Excellence in Writing has been really helpful. And my college boys would say that really made a difference for them in their college essays. And my oldest son actually published a little novel, a story that he wrote during high school. It's on Amazon. And so his writing, I think IEW was really helpful in his writing. And then we also love the curriculum called Dive into Math. And it just turns out here we are in this small community in the country, but David Shorman, Dr. Shorman, who is the creator of Dive and the teacher behind it's math and science. So Dive is really math and science from probably about fifth grade up. I want to say there's classes, but my boys started using all of Dive curriculum, and the professor is like a neighbor and a friend and goes to our church. And he's got a boat that he takes them out and they swim with dolphins and study sea life and all these opportunities to learn hands-on with Dr. Shorman. And so we love Dive curriculum. I think they call it Shorman Math and Shorman Science. So those are the three that we've really focused on: Abeka Dive for math and science, and IEW for writing. And the one thing I love about Dive is because my boys were interested in a science future, science and math, is that they did offer the AP classes. So they were able to take AP calculus, AP physics, which is hard to find in homeschooling. I know a lot of curriculums kind of stop at pre-calculus or stop at more basic sciences. So we were thrilled that Dive had those opportunities. And we really didn't explore dual enrollment with any of them until my third son. And my older boys are kind of bitter because they're like, hey, we went to college and our friends had like many credits. I just didn't know what I was doing yet. So I'm still learning as I'm going as a homeschool mom. I'd never tell anyone I'm a pro, but I'm learning as I'm going.
Yes. We all have our test kids, right? You're the
We
oldest. You say,
do.
oh, I figured out all the things not to do, and that's why I'm not doing that anymore.
Totally.
You gotta love it.
Yes.
So I'm okay. So it last before we kind of let you give some parents encouragement.
Uh,
Tell us about any kind of apps that you would recommend just for boys, or even things that parents can use to find ways to get encouragement to really just take this walk with their boys. There's a lot of distractions out there, and I love what you said. You want to highlight the good things. What kind of things could you recommend? either about
Right.
academics or helping with their boys?
What I would say is most of we are on the go a lot, especially because my younger two are surfing a lot, and sometimes we have to drive an hour to find surf. Most of what they do now is online, and so, like, my 6th grader who's doing mostly Abeka, he can watch his Abeka videos from his iPad while dad drives him to the surf. Um, they all have devotionals that they do on their apps. My surfer likes the Fellowship of Christian Athlete devotional. So, I mean, certainly there's that's what the love-hate relationship with the internet is. There's so much good out there. They follow great people. I'm such a believer in connecting them to good podcasts and good books and Audible books and all of that. But there's also that whole downside of I'm trying to get them off the screen when I can. So I'm trying to get them off of, we don't want them staring at a screen any more than they have to. So we try to take advantage of it where we can, but also get them outside, away from screens, and enjoying God's creation as much as possible.
Oh, this has been so good. So here's how I want you to close it, Monica. Words of encouragement
Ah, yeah.
to moms of boys who are
Mm.
listening, and maybe their lives with their boys is not going as good, right?
Mm,
How would you
totally.
encourage them?
Yes. Yes. And I totally understand that. For one, there's seasons, I think, and there's stages. And I really encourage parents not to assume that whatever season or stage you're in now is going to represent the full picture. This may be a passing thing, and I encourage you to believe that it is. If things are hard right now, don't own that. Don't let that become your identity that we just have a bad relationship, but really press through. I'm a big believer in prayer. I think God knows our hearts and God knows our kids' hearts. So I just encourage people to really pray. But also continue to be available to your son. Like I said early on in this conversation, we can sometimes pull back and assume they don't need us or they don't want to talk to us. They might go in their room, shut the door. I encourage you to knock on their door and sit down. And, especially as they hit those teenage years, late night seems to be when they like to open up and start talking right about the time you're exhausted. But it is so worth sitting on the edge of the bed, giving them a little back scratch, maybe bringing them a snack. Typically, shoulder to shoulder is the best way to talk to boys. So don't expect them to give you the eye contact and gaze into your eyes and open up their heart. But take a walk, take a drive, do some chores side by side, and then just open things up. And I just want to remind parents that the more you let them know that you're there, that you love them, that you're for them, they may not talk to you right away, but give it a few tries, keep coming back, keep telling them you're there. And one of those times they're going to need somebody to talk to, and they're going to know that you are available. So don't give up and just keep loving them. Also, have fun. Teenage boys are hilarious.
Yes,
Enjoy their humor. I mean, you got to keep them clean. You got to keep them, remind them what the boundaries are, but laugh with them, right? Don't you agree?
yes,
They're just hilarious.
yes.
So enjoy them. Try to have some fun, lighten up. Make your home environment as happy and positive. Play some music, bake something that smells good. I mean, boys are drawn to food. Boys are drawn to a happy environment. So just do your best to be a happy place, and they'll keep coming back.
Oh, that's great, Monica. I could keep this conversation going on and on with you. This is
Uh,
great. And
Thank
so we
you.
just want to thank you so much for your sharing. And for our listeners, if you would like to check out Monica's book, Boy Mom, or her
Mhm.
podcast, her book, please, will you give them your website so they can go to your website?
You betcha. I am at monicaswanson.com. All the links to everything is there. And I'd just love to also tell people when it comes to boys, character is so big. And I do have a character training course, which is for parents and it's for kids of all ages. But I initially really created it for parents of tweens and teens. And this comes from my experience, kind of challenged with one of my boys' character and something we tried that really made a difference. And now hundreds of families are being transformed by taking the character training course. And I launch that 3 times a year. So right on my homepage at monicaswanson.com, you'll see a button. This is character course. You can leave your name and email address, and then I'll let you know when we are going to open the doors to the character training course again.
Awesome. That's amazing. And that I will tell you guys, you guys have a jewel here. I love everything we talked about. We want to thank you at HSLDA for you taking the time. And we're here for anyone who needs us. You can visit our website at www.hslda. Thank you so much, Monica. And bye
Thank
for now.
you. Aloha.
Today's program is made possible by HSLDA's team of educational consultants. Are you feeling overwhelmed by the number of curriculum options to choose from? Or maybe you're frustrated because your child is struggling and you're not sure what to do next. Our educational consultants can help. As an HSLDA member, you have access to customized, practical guidance on everything from lesson planning and record keeping to helping a child with learning difficulties. If you want to experience less frustration and more progress in your homeschool, get support from our educational consultants by becoming a member of HSLDA. Learn more at hslda.org/join. That's hslda.org/join. Thanks for listening to this episode of Homeschool Talks. If you enjoyed this conversation, leave a review to let us know what you think. To hear more conversations like this one, be sure to subscribe to this podcast or head on over to hslda.org/podcast for more inspiring stories and awesome ideas about homeschooling. That's all for today. We hope you enjoyed the program, and we'll see you next time.